Hi Vazgen, it's lovely to see you here today. So Vazgen is Senior Product Manager at Adobe, is that correct?
That's correct, Amelia. Thanks for having me. So my experience in product management mostly comes from actually a Workfront, a company that was building a work management platform for enterprises. Last year, we were acquired by Adobe to increase content velocity and campaign performance for marketing teams specifically. So I think that's very dear to your
Oh,
heart, that
yeah,
topic.
that's amazing.
There are a
And
lot of challenges there.
so what is exactly that your product does in that case?
So Nimrod in his talk will speak about specifically the collaboration aspect.
Hmm.
Ours is about the general workflow. So for example, the campaign, it is initiated, it is executed, it is measured, how it's performing, how different assets are performing. And a lot of those steps are actually handled by Adobe solutions,
Mm,
like
okay.
creating the asset in Creative Cloud and Experience Cloud for actually working on the campaign itself. The Workfront solution, the platform for the work management, will be connecting all of those together and highlight opportunities and uncover areas where you can improve the actual content delivery and velocity.
Okay, gotcha. Maybe we should check it out then, because as you know, we are producing a lot of content, and basically we've been spending so much time figuring everything out, how to make the
Yeah.
workflow work, and we are using a whole bunch of tools sort of
Mm,
together. So there is a bit of
right.
a disconnect. So I might check it out to see if it can like address our pain. But yeah, today we will be talking a bit about addressing various pains. Um,
Mhm,
your topic for product drive is basically killing features, right?
mhm.
Why
Yep.
did you pick this topic? I mean, I'm super interested in it personally, but I want to hear
Mhm,
from you why you decided to pick especially this topic.
mhm. So, as I mentioned, we want to cover the full workflow of a
Mm,
campaign, and there are a lot of problems. There are a lot of challenges because each area of a workflow in itself can be a problem space that can give birth to a lot of products, really. Uh,
mm,
a big challenge for us is to maintain focus. How do we maintain focus to enable the whole workflow? And this is where actually killing features is super important because if you start going too deep into one direction, there is a lot of temptation to actually stay in that market and become a very narrow, focused on that market specifically. In past 3 years, personally, I have already deprecated, I think, three functionalities, like general functionalities, not even like a feature. So, and currently I'm working on the fourth. So that's a lot
mm.
of stuff that we are killing.
This is such a completely different perspective, because when we think about product managers, we usually think about people who come up with new features, right? And talks to the
Yep.
customers in order to create even more features that would add, even more value to the customer.
Hmm.
So I had this, well, maybe not an argument, but a discussion with our CEO. Well, it's less more, or is more
Hmm.
in the context of B2B SaaS especially. So, like in B2B, you often have these products that are super robust, right? They have dozens and dozens of features. And as a customer, you probably use like 20% of the product capacity, right? But you
Hmm.
buy
Yep.
into the potential of using more, right?
Yep.
So our
Hmm.
CEO maintained that basically in the B2B context, it's usually better to have more features, even if the product adoption overall is lower. What is your
Hmm.
take on this? If you're like basically hired to kill features rather than build features, I guess you may have a different perspective. So I would love to hear yours.
Hmm. Yeah, so don't get me wrong. I'm all for adding new features, and I add more features when I kill. So
Okay.
let's get that out of the way. But there is one thing that we need to keep in mind. Of course, we need to add features, but those features, all of them, will need to serve a common vision, a common strategy. So if
Mm-hmm.
you have a feature that is not aligned with it, or that it actually stops you from getting closer to the vision, this is where you start thinking about killing it or replacing it with a different solution. So there are a lot of ways to handle those cases. I think one big caveat here is that when we think about deprecating a feature, the deprecation itself is the same thing as thinking of a new feature. So it still has associated costs, the deprecation effort and the change management mostly that is associated with it. There is also associated gain in revenue, which is mostly decreasing costs, decreasing operational costs, things like that. Yeah, so it's still a feature. So when you think of it that way, it becomes much easier to actually justify those efforts and align them with the other new feature additions, because they all, you compare it, oranges to oranges, not apples to oranges.
Cool. Like, how do you decide? You mentioned something pretty important, right? That you kill a feature when it's not aligned with the overall vision of the product. How do you decide that this feature is actually not adding value, it's detracting value, right?
Yeah. So at Adobe, one of our core values is obsession over customers. So this is where this really comes into play. So when we start developing something on where we start researching whether to deprecate something or not, there is a very big pressure to learn everything you can about the actual problem, notwithstanding the solution. So we talk a lot to our customers to understand what they are trying to solve with this. And at the end of the day, when you understand what they want to accomplish, if solving that does not fit with what you want to do in the long term, it doesn't make sense for you to keep that and keep supporting that, because it constantly detracts you from following your main path. And I think there we can classify the features to be deprecated in 3 buckets. One of them is a feature that basically missed the market. It doesn't get adopted, it doesn't get used, it solves a wrong problem entirely. And for that, for those features, deprecation is really easy. So yeah, one of the features I deprecated early in my career was functionality that after deprecating it, nobody ever noticed that it was deprecated. So it was a super easy one. The second classification of features to be deprecated are the things that actually solve the right problem, and that problem is really aligned with what you want to do, but the implementation is not scalable. So either the business model is wrong, you cannot sustain it, or the technical complications, the architectural technology is not supporting where you want to go. So for example, one of the features there was Flash-based. And we had a suite of Flash-based products, and you have to deprecate that, but you don't want to lose that functionality. So in those cases, in many cases, you actually build a new one with a new technology, with a new tech stack. And there is the third one, which is the hardest one really to explain to customers, which is when you solve a really right problem, but that problem is not what you want to solve. So, and this is where the communication becomes really important, and understanding what the customer want to accomplish with this. So one feature that we had as an example there was solution that allowed to track people's time and work that is assigned to them on a daily basis by hourly basis. When you actually schedule tasks for someone on an hour by hour basis, a really micromanagement type of scenario. So we don't want to go there, because it's really not how the world evolves. Everything goes more about more high level, more agency from the actual person who is doing the work. So there was a lot of conversations around that, whether we need to support that or not. But at the end of the day, we just say, no, we cannot support that. And we suggest some solutions for that. So for example, this type of problems is where our partners come in. So partners really capitalize a lot on the problems that are not aligned with your core mission, but they are adjacent to it, and they can provide a solution that solves a customer problem. So we suggest things like that.
Oh, so the first two are pretty easy. The third scenario, I guess you may be getting some backlash from the users that have actually
Yeah.
adopted a vision that is not
Yeah.
aligned with the vision anymore. How do you deal with
Mhm.
that?
Yeah, so the biggest thing I learned, the biggest lesson I learned so far is that transparency is really the key. So
Mm,
when you say that we will think about that and go disappear for 3 months and then come back and say, yeah, we're not doing that, that's not helping anyone.
mm,
It's much better to actually say that we are not doing it in the first place and explain why. So you should have a really good justification, the same justification really that you bring to your executives when you
right.
actually want to deprecate that. So you have to have that. Better to be transparent with customers and explain that, because nobody really wants to waste time. And if that is the use case that they want to accomplish with our product, and our product is not meant to solve that use case, there will be tension along the way. There will be problems. There will be push for adding some support that, and it will constantly be the pain for both us and the customer. So it's easier for them to learn that sooner rather than later and actually
Gotcha.
plan accordingly.
Give them advance notice to, well, prevent any disgruntlement. I mean, there will be probably
Yeah,
some, but you know, you can't
yeah.
make everyone happy. That's the thing.
Yep.
Uh, so yeah, now that I have you here, an expert in feature depreciation, I really wanted to ask you this question that has been playing on my mind for a long time. So there are these big B2B platforms that have a robust use case, right? Say they are,
Mm-hmm.
you know, like Ahrefs or SEMrush or even Google Analytics, right? They have a
Mm-hmm.
lot of different functionality that, you know, is probably not used 100% by anyone, right? And, you know, what is the goal of such platforms in terms of feature adoption? Should
Mm-hmm.
they, you know, push me to adopt more features, and should they in some way foster feature discovery in me? Because I sometimes
Mm-hmm.
wonder, you know, like I subscribe to say Ahrefs or Surfer SEO, right? These are robust platforms, and I haven't yet gotten any, you know, support in terms of feature discovery from the
Mm-hmm.
platform as I'm using them. And sometimes I would even like to, you know the capabilities of the tool more, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's just
Yep.
not doing anything to help me discover more features. So I wonder, because
Mm-hmm.
Userpilot is a platform that is designed for product people to, you know, push for that product growth and feature discovery with various in-app
Mm-hmm.
experiences, and we educate our customers to do that. But if I'm to be completely honest, I see a lot of market leaders not doing anything of that at all. So would you say it's the market is still not mature enough to sort of understand user behavior in app, right, and
Mm-hmm.
suggest the kind of features that the user should discover? Or is there
Mm-hmm.
another reason that I'm not seeing why the companies are deciding to basically leave me to my own devices, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so one thing that you may not have discovered in your use case is the actual company maturity, right?
Mm,
So there is, specifically for B2B, there are different phases of maturity, and we have, for example, in our platform, functionality that will not work until you pass a certain level of maturity.
mm,
So for example, if you don't track your tasks in the system, you cannot do really a robust reporting on them and
yeah.
base your decision based on that. So first step is to actually capture the data and then provide insights over the data and then provide insights on the insights. So that's
Okay.
we can think about that. And in that sense, some features are not meant to be discovered really as the user starts using the platform. Some features should be, and I think this is where a lot of B2B SaaS products are failing, is that those bare bone, really critical features that every new user should know. This is where a lot of companies actually miss the mark on the onboarding new users. And there is also one thing to consider is that when you sell a B2B SaaS software to a customer, usually the training and everything is covered by a specific person or specific department at that
Mm,
customer's company. and their vision of how the training should go might be different from what we think should be trained on. That's also a challenge, specifically for the enterprise software, because the users are, there are a lot of users, and they want to have a consistent experience for everyone. Some users are early adopters, some users are laggards, they don't want change. So how do you make it so that everyone gets it at the right time and the company does not stagger when you start rolling out those changes? And that actually ties again back to the depreciation. One thing that is specific to B2B SaaS is when you deprecate a feature, there are associated training costs for the customer for it. And you have to take that into account. You cannot just tell that this is the date, 2 weeks from now, we are killing that off if there are people using it. There needs to be some timeline that they go through.
Yeah, and possibly you may want to, suggest some alternatives, right? To kind of be fair with the customer if they're using a particular feature extensively. And yeah, but you touched upon company maturity in terms of the user's maturity, and I understand that feature discovery is not linear, right? So basically, as you said, users need to have adopted certain features and use them extensively in order for other features to make sense for them. But yeah, for instance, we are like, I would say, power users of Asana. We've built like extensive workflows in Asana across different teams. So both, marketing, engineering, and I noticed a couple of weeks, maybe it was already months ago, Asana introduced reporting, right? So something similar to what you mentioned. And they did push a little tooltip, or was it a slide out saying, hey, we introduced reporting. But I feel like it's been like my onboarding, secondary onboarding on this secondary feature has been a bit half-baked, even in the case of a huge company like Asana, right? Because we do use workflows extensively. We have very complex workflows of numbers of tasks. So actually reporting would be very useful, but we didn't get any training apart from the little feature announcement. So what do you think is the problem? Is it the problem in lack of resources, lack of human resources to basically analyze user data effectively? I mean, there are so many analytics tools like Heat, Mix, Panel, Amplitude, la-di-da, right? That are, should in theory supply big companies like this with enough user data for them to predict that we are mature enough to adopt this feature, successfully. Or is it a kind of a trade-off that they know that we have used so many other features that Asana is so sticky for us now that for us to move all these workflows to another tool, like simply it's the Pareto rule. They know we won't leave anyway, so there's no point in investing even more resources in us to adopt a new feature. Like, you know what I mean? Like, what is the reason why companies are still not pushing for further feature adoption?
Yeah, so my opinion on that, I don't know how Asana does that and what problems they had specifically with onboarding. But what I can say is that the actual training of a feature of how you onboard a person, that is also a part of a product. So when you write a user story, you should think about how that feature is discovered. You should take into account, for example, support. How can support it? Things like that, right? So I think in a lot of cases, when you define a new functionality, a new big functionality, you really want to expose that to a certain person who will be doing the training. Those early adopters specifically who will just go into that, play with it, learn it on their own, and then spread for other users as well. So I think that's also a part of a problem where you really rely a lot on the customer to do the training instead of doing the training yourself. And there is also one point you mentioned about the data, of actually analyzing the data. You are quite right. There is a lot of data currently being tracked. and perhaps too much in some cases. But when we track that data, the actual data analyst role is a really new role. So it's not that there are a lot of data analysts across the globe, really good data analysts. So each company has a few, so to speak, but that's too small a number of people to actually drive the entire platform, the entire big B2B SaaS platform, to say, okay, no, this is how the pattern goes here, this is how the pattern goes here. This is a dedicated full-time job, and we don't have enough people to actually do that job.
Right. Do you think this is something that in the near or further future, the AI will automate? So, you know, like machine learning will be able to observe user behavior on large samples of users and see these patterns automatically and create, you know, segments based on well, certain user behavior. So something we currently have to do manually with the help of data scientists. Yeah, do you think this will happen, and this will kind of foster better communication with the users in app?
I really think so. So there are very simple things that AI can really do today as well. So for example, default. There are a lot of cases where your default setting value that you have defined is not really the right default. So every time a new user goes in, they change that setting if they find it, and they start getting value. So the analysts, what are we doing there? We are looking at the funnel in one case and the funnel in the other case, and see that this one has a much better conversion and make the change of a default. Really, that's not a very complex thing that AI can do. So all the data is there. It can really do that even today. It's a fairly simple algorithm. I don't really think that you'll need even an AI for that. You can really write a few if-else statements and get where you want to go. But longer term, when we go into more complex onboarding scenarios, like more user personalized onboarding, this is where AI will really shine, because what I mentioned is a general for everyone, and but the personalized pattern of how the person uses the product, what are their goals with the product, things like that. This is where you will need a much more sophisticated system to do the recommendation.
Yeah, exactly. This is kind of what we are, in a sense, struggling with, because we built a tool that enables, you know, product marketers, especially in product managers, to communicate with users at different stages of the user journey in order to foster the desirable behaviors, right? And in order, for instance, to push them to upgrade, to push them to adopt certain features, which usage correlates with, you know, higher user satisfaction, or for instance, you know, expansion revenue. Ultimately, we would all like our users to become power users and upgrade, right? But this is not happening. Also because I realized that especially smaller product teams, they don't really understand their user journey that well, because it's still pretty difficult to get these patterns, I would say. So yeah, possibly, as you said, like this AI tools might make it easier to see, like, well, say take a segment of users that are considered power users that have like a very high NPS score, for instance, and that, you know, may have upgraded their accounts in the last, you know, 6 months, and see what is the usage pattern, what was the user journey basically from sign up to this upgrade event, right? And then on a larger volume of data, see what happened, and then help the users who aren't following that same path, but who have similar demographics or use case, right, actually adopt these features that would give them more satisfaction. So
yeah, so for example, when you think of the actual features and the onboarding, right, there are a lot of analytics tools that provide anomaly detection functionality, which is basically the first step. You connect the decision to that, and you get already improvements there. So it detects the anomaly. It's easy. Yeah.
Well, can you name a few tools like that, or?
I know Datadog does that. It's this microservice mostly tracking and like logging type of solution, much more than just logging. So there are a lot of functionality to it. One of those is that anomaly detection, which can actually show you the usage pattern, and when it drops for some reason, and then you get a notification from the tool that says that there is an anomaly. So there is even an action associated with it.
Okay, right, interesting. Yeah, so I mean, I presume a tool like that that catches these anomalies could, for instance, also predict when the user has changed within an organization.
Yep.
So another common scenario that we see is that invited users or new users that join an organization later on, for instance, to replace an employee that is leaving, often do not get the support from the tool to basically get up to speed, right? And that's when, for instance, the usage pattern could change. So maybe in the future, like the science fiction of product management, we would be able to get, you know, a notification, well, this is actually a new user in this organization that needs more support, send a customer success person to talk to them.
Yeah. Another example can be promotion. Like you promoted to a different role, your usage pattern with the tool might change dramatically, and there is no way the system will understand whether you are a new user in that role or whether you have been an old user which have been promoted. So.
Yeah, totally. That's also a very interesting use case that I haven't thought about. Awesome. One last question about killing features. Is it possible, because obviously, you know, the cost of building a feature is substantial and supporting it, maintaining it, and then ultimately when you decide, well, that was a bad choice, right? It's sort of, you know, sunk cost. Probably a lot of product managers would fall into this trap of sunk cost fallacy and trying to like resurrect a feature that's not working. Is there anything that a product manager can do to not fall into the trap of creating bad features? Is it possible to, you know, preclude the situation at all?
Yeah, if there was a product that would stop me from building bad features, it would be like an amazing product management product. No, I think bad features will happen from time to time, and this is where what all of that lean movement and MVP approach is all about, to actually learn and fail fast instead of building and building and building and then finding out that this thing is not working. I think what people can do really when they see that the feature is not being adopted, really dig deep and understand why. So in a lot of cases, people look at the data, they see the pattern, and they make the decision entirely based on the data. But the data can only point the problem. It will not tell you the cause of the problem, really. So for that, you'll really need to talk to people, and maybe there is a totally different reason why that feature fails, and you might decide that it is worth killing, or you might decide that, yeah, if we just fix this part of an entirely disconnected workflow, this feature will start getting adopted.
I've seen this before. So I worked at a smaller like social media scheduling tool, and they had certain features that made sense but were placed in such a place in the interface or workflow that people were not actually using them or not using them effectively. And we decided to launch a churn survey, right, to see why people were leaving. And then we discovered, for instance, that some of them were leaving because they couldn't, you know, they didn't discover a certain feature that was there, but was just in a wrong place in the workflow. So taking it out of this place and putting it in a different place in the interface has actually changed, you know, the usage pattern. So it wasn't exactly like it was the wrong feature, right? It was just in the wrong place, as you said. So things like that can also happen.
And the problem was worth solving, right? So you know that you want to solve that, but your feature doesn't solve it today. So why?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, so the bottom line is probably talk to your users. Talk to your users even more, right? Observe their behavior. Yeah. Anything else you would add for product managers who, you know, like are facing this decision whether to kill a feature or not?
Mhm. Yeah, I think just one, you mentioned talking to people, and that's really crucial. This is really helpful when you need to justify why you don't do this to a customer. When you
Mm-hmm.
really understand their use case, the conversation is totally different when you just decided it and you're just
Yeah.
doing it. But I think the biggest advice from mind will be to just think of deprecation as just a feature. Like, it is a feature, it has costs, it has revenue, it has alignment with a strategy. You have to justify it the same way you justify any new feature.
Mm.
And just think about it in that sense. And that way, a lot of stuff will actually easily make room in your roadmap, because sometimes deprecating something can bring more value than actually delivering something. There are cases like that as well.
Yeah, that's fascinating, because I guess like some people would consider it a failure, right? But sort of rephrasing it, reframing it as just another feature is a great way to go. Thank you so much, Vazgen. That was really interesting conversation. So yeah, we'd like to invite everyone to listen to your full talk on Product Drive, happening on the 4th and 5th of October 2021. And yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing your full talk. And thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Emilia. I think feature deprecation, as you mentioned, is a really underserved area in product management. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak more about how we do that at Adobe.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of the day. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.